Hi, this is the Cell Unit Part 1 remediation video. First we have biomolecules. Now biomolecules are also known as macromolecules, and these are essential molecules for cells and all living things. So our first macromolecule out of the four are carbohydrates. They are also commonly known as carbs. Carbs are used in cells and the body as a fast source of energy. So if you have worked out, generally you're going to think of something that has a lot of protein, but also some carbs to help give you the energy that you depleted during your workout. Carbohydrates are made of monomers called monosaccharides, and monosaccharides are just simple sugars. Examples of foods that are carbohydrates include breads, pastas, grains, candy, chips, and rice. The second macromolecule are lipids. Lipids make up the cell membrane, but they also act as long-term energy storage. So in the cell membrane we have phospholipids, but in energy storage it's just whatever the body uses for storing it. So lipids are made of glycerol and fatty acids, and examples include butter and oil for food types, but also cholesterol. So cholesterol is actually a good thing in moderation because it does make up part of the cell membrane with the phospholipids. Next we have proteins, which make up muscle tissues. So this is why you think of athletes building muscle means that they have a high protein diet. Proteins also make up enzymes, and they assist in cell transport. Proteins are made of smaller molecules known as amino acids, and different food sources that are high in protein include meat, eggs, beans, and nuts. Last but not least, we have nucleic acids. Nucleic acids contain all genetic information which codes for traits. These are made up of nucleotides, and examples of nucleic acids include DNA and RNA. Now, DNA and RNA are not food sources, but if you ate fruit or vegetable, then you are eating DNA from whichever fruit or vegetable you ate. However, your body just digests it and you don't get actual energy from it. The other three do give you energy, but carbs are the primary source of energy, or the easiest source. Next would be lipids, and last would be proteins. Enzymes. Enzymes are proteins, like we just stated, but enzymes are proteins that speed up chemical reactions. So they make chemical reactions in cells go faster. They do this by attaching to substrates, which are the molecules that need to go through a chemical reaction. So when the reaction is finished, the enzyme releases the product. So if you see at the bottom left, we start with a gray circle with some puzzle pieces taken out. That is our enzyme, and it binds to a substrate, which is the yellow shape. So when they bind together, the enzyme helps make that chemical reaction go faster, and the substrate can break into two products that needed to be made. Keep in mind, we can also have enzymes that match up with a substrate or two substrates that fuses them together in the chemical reaction to make a singular product. Now going to a little bit different from the biochemistry, we're going straight to cells. So cell theory has three parts. All living things are made of one or more cells. So we have human cells, plant cells. Bacteria are one cell, so they would be considered unicellular, but they are still made of cells. 2, all cells come from pre-existing cells, so there had to be some sort of cell that gave rise to other cells. So if we skin our knee, we have skin cells that are going to divide to create the new skin cells that will eventually heal the cut. If we think about living beings on a whole, you have a dad and a mom generally, for humans at least, and for other mammals and animals, where dad's sperm meets up with mom's egg, and those are two cells that meet up together to create one cell that then divides to create a new living being. 3, the cell is the smallest living unit. So it is the structural and functional unit in all living things. So you can have bacteria that are just one cell big and it's living on its own just fine. Or you can have humans and plants and fungi that are made of many cells that in humans, for example, you have cells that make up tissues, which make up organs, which make up organ systems, that altogether make up an organism. I would like to point out that the cell is the smallest living unit. There are things that are smaller, such as atoms, which make up the different elements that can create molecules, but we also have viruses, which most scientists do not say that they are alive. And here's why. Viruses require a host in order to reproduce. Now remember when we talked about characteristics of life way back at the beginning of the school year, one of the things was that they have to be able to reproduce, and viruses can't without the assistance of a host. So viruses are technically, and for our class, not living. The smallest types of living cells that we have here on Earth are bacterial cells. Speaking of cell types, we have two main different types of cells that we are going to talk about. We have prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes has the pro that rhymes with no. So there's no nucleus, no specialized organelles. They are unicellular, so they do not have more than one cell. They have a cell wall. This includes all bacteria for prokaryotes, and they are generally smaller. Eukaryotes, the EU is pronounced U, and you are a eukaryote. So our cells have a nucleus. They have specialized organelles such as a mitochondria or a Golgi or an endoplasmic reticulum. Plant cells have chloroplasts. So these are all specialized organelles. Eukaryotes can be multicellular like humans and plants and fungi, or they can be unicellular like some of the algae that's out there, or amoebas. Some eukaryotes do have a cell wall. Plants, for example, have cell walls, but animals and humans do not have cell walls. Eukaryotes includes plants, animals, fungi, and something else called protists. And eukaryotic cells are generally larger, especially larger than bacterial cells. Now, all cells, whether they are prokaryotes or eukaryotes, have 4 shared characteristics. They all have a cell membrane. They all have ribosomes. They all have cytoplasm, so that watery stuff that's inside of the cell membrane. And they all have DNA. For eukaryotes, the DNA is in a nucleus. For prokaryotes, the DNA is just kind of hanging out in the cytoplasm. Now let's look at 2 different eukaryotic cell types. So animal cells, which includes humans, and plant cells. All animal and plant cells have a nucleus, membrane, ribosome, mitochondria, and a cytoplasm. But plant cells have 3 other things that animal cells do not. This includes a cell wall, so it protects the cell, a chloroplast, which is where photosynthesis takes place, and a large central vacuole. So that vacuole usually fills up with water, which helps that plant cell actually stay in shape. Animal cells do not have a cell wall, chloroplast, or if they have a vacuole, it's generally a lot smaller. Here are the other organelles that we can talk about. So a nucleus is that control center of the cell, and it holds the cell's DNA. Mitochondria creates energy for the cell to use, so that's why it's called the powerhouse. The cell membrane controls what goes in and out of the cell, kind of like a bouncer. Ribosomes make proteins for the cells to use. The Golgi apparatus packs and ships proteins and other cell products to other cells. So sometimes your cell makes something and a different cell needs it, and it gets shipped in something called a vesicle, which is kind of like a box, and it gets shipped by the Golgi. The endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, acts as a tunnel for proteins and lipids that the cell makes. So it's just kind of like a little highway within the cell, or a tunnel. The cytoplasm is the watery gel-like fluid that holds enzymes and other molecules. Centrioles make spindle fibers used in cell division. So we will talk about those more in mitosis. Lysosomes break down old cell parts or waste using enzymes to clean up the cell. So lysosome and lysol can go together as well, because lysol helps clean up messes. Lysosomes help clean up the cell. And then we have the vacuole, which stores water, food, and waste for cells. Again, in a plant cell, it's generally a large vacuole, but in animal cells, they're going to be smaller. Sometimes they're not even there. The cell wall protects the cell and provides the cell with shape and structure. So in plant cells, they do absolutely that. They help keep the plant cell in a certain shape. And then chloroplasts make sugar during photosynthesis for the cell to use. So again, chloroplasts are only found in plant cells. Cell transport. So cell transport has to do with our cell membranes and different molecules that are needed within the cell. So there are 3 types of passive cell transport, which are diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. So in diffusion, molecules move across the membrane from high to low concentration. So again, they're moving with the gradient. They're going from high to low, which means it's a lot easier. So energy isn't required. The molecules are just naturally going to spread out. Osmosis is the diffusion of water. So in other words, water molecules will move across a membrane, generally through aquaporins, because those are protein channels specifically to let water in and out, from high to low concentration. So again, we're going with the gradient, so no energy is required. Facilitated diffusion is for other molecules to move in or out of a membrane through a protein channel from high to low concentration. So since it's again going with the concentration gradient, no energy is required. So in all 3 of these, they are passive, which means no energy is required. It's kind of just if you're sitting there listening to someone talk, or you're watching a show. Active transport, on the other hand, is exactly what it sounds like. It means that there is an activity going on. Molecules use a protein to take them in or out of a membrane from low to high concentration. So again, these others were going from high to low. This one is low to high. So you have to put in energy in order to make that happen. Homeostasis. So this goes with the cell transport, and we'll explain why on the next slide. But homeostasis means maintaining a stable internal or inside environment in the cell or body, despite changes in the external or outside conditions. The example is when it's cold outside, your body temperature stays relatively constant at around 98.6 degrees. So if you go outside when it's 30 degrees out, your body temperature doesn't just go to 30 degrees. Chances are, even if you feel like you are going to have hypothermia, your body temperature is well above 90 degrees, and this is because your cells are trying to keep you and your body in homeostasis. So homeostasis means a balance in the cells and body, and it does that by doing negative or positive feedback. Now, negative does not mean bad, and positive does not mean good. Negative feedback brings conditions to their normal set point when they have gone away from it. So for example, if you get a fever, that means your temperature went above 98.6. Generally, we think of a fever as being 100 degrees or over. So if you get a fever that high, your body works to bring it back down to 98.6. Positive feedback, though, keeps a process going until that process is completed. For example, during childbirth, hormones continue signaling the mother to push until the baby is out. Once the baby is out, that hormone signal stops because the process has been completed. All right, to bring it all together, homeostasis and osmosis. So remember, osmosis is the movement of water, and water likes to follow salt. So the water is going to always go where the bigger number of salt is. So in the case of a hypotonic solution, that means that there is a lower solute or salt concentration on the outside and a larger salt concentration on the inside of the cell. This means that water is going to rush into the cell where it's higher salt concentration to try and even it out, and the cells are going to grow because water is rushing in. Eventually, this can cause the cells to burst, which means they die. Isotonic solutions mean that there is an equal amount of salt on the outside and inside. So even though water will go in, the same amount of water will go out, so cells are going to stay the same size. In hypertonic solutions, there is more salt on the outside of the cell. So that means because water follows salt, water is going to go out of the cell. And this means that the cells are going to shrink, and that also can cause cell death. So there we have it with homeostasis, osmosis, and cell transport.